大家好. So next parasha tells us about the sizes of the Rashis. Aries, Leo, and Capricorn have a large body. Gemini, Virgo, Libra, Sagittarius, Aquarius, and Pisces have a medium body. Taurus is tall, Cancer is stout, and Scorpio has a small body. So Aries, Leo, and Capricorn are the large signs. So when we are talking about people, those signs give a body that is big in height and big in build, right? So people get, a body with big solid bones, and they are taller, and their body frame is proportionately bigger. Now, Aries, Leo, and Capricorn is not as tall as Taurus, right? Taurus is the tallest sign, right? But Taurus doesn't give a big body frame, right? It doesn't have the big girth of Aries, Leo, and Capricorn, right? Taurus is just tall, but the girth is not much different really than that of a medium sized body, okay? Now, Gemini, Virgo, Libra, Sagittarius, Aquarius, and Pisces, they have a body build that is average, right? It is medium-sized. Of course, what is sort of the average, body height, we could say? That, of course, depends on, the cultural background, right? The average size of a person in China is going to be different than the average size of a person in Australia, right? And a person in Australia, the average, we could say height or overall just build, right, that comes along with it, that is going to be different than that, let's say, of the average, size person in Sweden. And sometimes even within a country, especially when a country is very big, there's a difference in size. Let's say from those who live in the north of the country and those who live in the south of the country. Right? So for determining the height of a man or woman, you have to keep in mind the country and cultural background that they're coming from. Now, the same can also be said about the size of whatever you really want to know about. Right? When we talk about real estate, Aries, Leo, and Capricorn are going to give you something big. Big in real estate means something different, of course, in every culture, right? In every country. So in Australia, big means that, you get a house and a lot of land because the country is so big and there is not many people living there, and so everyone gets a lot of land along with their house, right? On the other hand, a big property in Germany is considered a normal-sized family house with a lot less land. German people think of a family house, as a house with, a big garden, enough to have some maybe fruit trees there, a playground with a sandbox, and you might even have a garage with a workshop. But neither are the houses, proportionately, like massively big, okay? Or the gardens usually also don't tend to be really that great. But in Australia, for example, a normal house for people can have a really huge actually garden and land that comes actually along with it. In the US, the houses, especially in the suburbs, they are on average much, much bigger than in Germany, right? In the US, bigger is always considered better. But people in Germany or Europe, they don't think like that, right? So you always need to consider the background that a person is from if you want to actually determine the size of land, house, and apartment, right? What kind of home are people used to, right? In China, many people, they prefer to live in big cities, and there they live in apartments. And the size of the apartment heavily depends on what city you live in, right? Or in which part of the city, or even in which part of China that you live in, right? Again, it's up to the individual person and how they grew up that determines what they consider a small or a big apartment. Cancer is considered the stout sign. When it comes to our body, Cancer gives an average height, but a more solid build. Okay, it is not a fat body, but a bit extra body weight. Right, so the body is a little bit more solidly built, and Cancer is considered to be the stout sign. Scorpio is the small-bodied sign, and it gives a body that is smaller in height and smaller in build, right? Particularly small in build as far as the thickness of limbs and wrists. And Scorpio is the sign that makes people just smaller, okay? Taurus makes people taller, although Taurus maintains the average body frame. Scorpio not only is shorter in height, but also more slender and delicate. You know, Scorpio makes the features of the body more delicate as well. The hands, arms, and legs, they become more slender and delicate. So if you want to find out the height and build of a person, check the Lagna and Lagna Lord in the D1 as well as in the D30, because Parashar tells us for things related to the body, we also need to consider the D30. And then you simply combine the results. So let's say a person is Aries Lagna, then they have a bigger body. But now you also need to look at the Lord of Aries, which is Mars. So if Mars is in Scorpio, then a person might not have such a big body, right? They might just get sort of an average sized body because Aries is big and Scorpio is small. But let's say if Mars is in Cancer, then the person is not only big, but also has got some extra weight. So do this for both the D1 and the D30 and you will get a complete picture of the person's body size. Now, we also need to consider the planets because we also need to consider that the planets alter the size as well, okay? And in the planets course, I actually teach about the sizes of the planets. You know, Jupiter has a big body. Saturn's body is as tall as Jupiter's, but the difference is actually that Saturn is quite thin, okay? So the things that you know about the planets are also going to play a role in the build of a person, right? The moon is going to give a person round, feminine bodily features and so on. So maybe you need to go back to your notes from the planet course so that you don't miss anything when you're trying to determine the size and build of the body. Now, if you're planning on buying yourself an apartment, you can actually get insights about the size of the apartment, right? If Jupiter gives you an apartment and he is, let's say, in Aries, then you know that the apartment is going to be super big, right? Aries is the big sign, and Jupiter now is also making things big, and so now you get a super big apartment. On the other hand, Scorpio makes everything small. So if a planet gives you a property through Scorpio, then it might actually be quite small. And if Jupiter is in Scorpio, then it will be sort of a medium-sized property. When we get into the other courses on Vargas and Dashas, you will see that this is such an easy way actually to add some extra information to your prediction. Let's say you are a real estate developer, right? Then Taurus will allow you to build very high buildings, right? Let's say high-rise buildings with dozens of floors, right? Because Taurus is, the tallest of all the planets. So if Taurus is connected to your real estate, then you're going to get a very tall building. Now, if Saturn is in Taurus, then the building might be even taller, okay? Because Saturn is also very tall. And as an example, the person who built the Woolworth Tower in New York had Mercury, Saturn in Taurus, which got activated in his, in that person's horoscope at the time of construction. And by the time it was open in 1913, it was considered the tallest building in the world until 1930. And Mercury, Saturn formed this amazing Raj Yoga to really solidify this person's fortune and business success. And so he was able to build such a huge building, such a huge company building, okay? Now in China also, of course, sometimes, we see these big real estate projects, with so many buildings. And it is expected that those large bodied signs combine with some large body planets to create such mega projects. But anytime you want to judge the size of something, then those sizes of the signs become very useful. You can also actually use this as an easy way to rectify a chart, right? If you have to decide between one or the other lagna, right? If you get a person who is very delicately built, or perhaps even has a frail body structure, and you need to decide, let's say, between Scorpio and Sagittarius rising, then take the Scorpio rising, right, which is the small person. Sometimes this can really be a very easy way to make a decision, right? If you have to decide between, Taurus and Gemini, and the woman comes in and she's very tall, you can see she has, long legs, but the body structure is just, it's just actually normal, right? She seems to just have the girth of the body. It's just like a normal person, but this body is just very tall. This person is just very tall, right? And it's easy to say, wow, this is a very long and tall person. And so she is Taurus rising. You can also use the sizes of the Rashis in a broader way. Healthy planets in Taurus are going to give you something that will last for a long time. The word that Parashar actually uses for Taurus is long, because in Sanskrit language, when something is considered to be tall, the word actually that is used is long. And so we can also use this in a broader sense, that Taurus represents the things we have for a long time, right? And so healthy planets in Taurus are going to give you something that will last for a long time. If Taurus is afflicted, then it's going to be more difficult to have something that lasts a long time, right? And so if someone comes to you and asks you about their business project, and they're saying, wow, they have this long-term goal that they're working on, they really expect their business they expect to do their business for like 20 years, but then you cast a Prajna chart and Taurus is badly afflicted, then you know that, you won't do that as long as you expected, right? But if Taurus is good, then you can tell them, yes, you have a very solid long-term plan. When there are good planets in the big signs, then people want to do big things, right? If there's yogas and powerful planets in Aries, Leo, and Capricorn, then these people, they're gonna do big projects, right? That will not be little projects, right? Because those big signs want to do big things. And if those planets are afflicted in those signs, then they will be unable to do big things, right? They are going to somehow fail in doing the big things in their life. And so if someone comes in and says, hey, I have this huge project that I'm working on, look at Aries, Leo, and Capricorn to see if that person has the capacity to really make those huge projects happen. Now, if a person comes to you and asks about a small project, right? They ask about this sort of a small business that I like to do. Then, look at Scorpio and see if, the little thing that they're working on will be successful, right? Interesting enough, sometimes the small project can actually be quite big. But the person thinks that it is very small, right? When Aries, Leo, and Capricorn people, when they say, I have this, big idea, I have got this big project that I'm working on, well, Scorpio might come in and say, hey, I have this, little project going on there. Actually, those projects might actually be the same thing, right? But one person sees it as a small thing and the other person sees it as a big thing. So a lot of the times you can also take it as, a lot of the times it really has to do with the attitude of a person that is different, right? And Scorpio represents insects. And insects are these, very little creatures whose life comparatively don't matter, right? If there's one more insect on the planet, it makes no difference, right? However, if all the bees died, right, then we would, starve very shortly after that, because we need all those bees for pollination. Now, while for insects, little jobs seem small, in the big scheme of things, an insect's job is actually hugely important. All insects are actually hugely important. Any species that gets wiped out will cause a huge problem and imbalance on the planet, okay? But an insect, is just not seen as sort of this, as a big thing, okay? In the same way, a person, with a nice and productive Scorpio, they might just think, oh, I have this little project that I'm working on. For them, considering everything that sort of goes on planet Earth, this is just sort of a very little drop in the ocean. And that's how they approach their project, right? But the Aries person, they can have the very same idea and the very same project, but to them it's like the biggest thing on Earth. And that's because of their attitude. So it's really better if you don't say that the project is necessarily going to be big or small in its importance. It may or may not be that concretely big. But surely the person is going to see themselves in their project as small or big, right? With Aries, Leo, and Capricorn, they're going to see themselves really big in respect to their project. And with Scorpio, they see themselves as a very, as very small in relationship to their project, right? Which might be an amazing and huge project, but for them, they think it is small. Aries and Scorpio, they also have to do with the military, because Mars is the planet that rules the military. And Aries and Scorpio are the signs of Mars. So Scorpio is the soldier who plays that small role in the military. And Aries is the commander-in-chief of the military, right? So the army consists of many small individuals, and really just one of them not being there and doing what he should be doing, that could really cause an operation to fail. So the soldier also has a very important role to play, and is a critical part when we consider the whole picture. It's just that Aries, Leo and Capricorn, they see things as bigger, right? They see themselves playing a big role, which may or may not be true in reality. So don't think just because, you get people who have, lots of planets in Aries, Leo, and Capricorn, that they're going to do more important things automatically, right? They see themselves as doing more important things, and the things they do, they consider bigger things. They say, oh, this is, the biggest thing in the world that needs to get done. But the Scorpio person, they might be doing the same thing. And for them, this is just sort of a little thing that needs to get done in the world. But they can be the same thing. Just for one, it's sort of the biggest thing. And for the other one, it's just a little thing of many things that go on in the world. The stout body sign Cancer wants something to be solid. Now, when there are good planets in Cancer, then a person's attitude is that they want to get something solid. You might wonder, why is it, Cancer is feminine, it is changing, it's adaptable. But Cancer needs a solid foundation so that it can have peace of mind and good feelings. And so Cancer wants to depend on something so that it wants to depend on something that it basically can be happy, okay? And if Cancer is in good shape, then a person will get something solid so that they can actually fulfill their needs and they can feel good about themselves in their life. If Cancer is afflicted, then a person won't be able to get something that is solid, right? They have, difficulty in creating a solid emotional foundation in their life. Now, for the medium-sized signs, everything is sort of average, right? The body size is average. Their projects seem to be of average size and greatness, to them. They don't go to extremes with things, right? Those medium-sized signs, they are the more balanced signs. So the signs there are really important, to add, details to your predictions, right? And at some point, I really like to do a course that's all about adding those details to, to whatever it is that we are looking at in the horoscope, right? The signs are the foundation for giving details. But then, of course, the details of the signs they get modified by the details of the planets. But usually the signs give more of the details. And the planets, they actually just also tend to be the thing itself. So let's say Venus rules, the wife in a man's chart. And if Venus is in Taurus, then the wife will be tall, right? So Venus is, the wife, which is the planet Venus is the wife, but then it is in the sign of Taurus, and that's why the wife will be tall. And that will be one factor to look at, okay? But then we also have to look at all the other factors, bearing on, the wife in a man's chart to see her build and size. And so, yeah, at some point, I'll be doing a course that's only meant for predicting those types of details. Many times it's really difficult to know what to focus on when a person asks a question, right? There's so many places that you can look at in the horoscope, and it's hard to really, pinpoint, okay, what is it exactly then I have to focus on to answer this person's question? Well, you can always pay attention to the keywords that sort of the person mentions that relate actually to the signs, right? So if the person talks about a big business project that they want to do, you cast the personal chart, and if, let's say, Aries, the big signs are Aries, Leo, and Capricorn, but you see Saturn debilitated in Aries in the 7th house of business, then you know that this is just not going to be a good idea. And, maybe, you should do something different or something like that. Right? If a person, let's say, they talk about a certain place that they want to live in, right? We will soon find out that the signs also, they rule the various places, right? The Virgo rules the mountains, for example. Right? The person gets tired of city life, they want to breathe, some fresher air, they want to, see the beautiful view of the valley every day. And they ask you, hey, should I move into the mountains? Well, look at Virgo and see if it's favorable for the person. So look for these keywords that have to do with the signs to see what sign to focus on in the chart, and so that you can answer, whatever question that you need to answer.